Let's get right into it. Heather, talk to me about prioritizing self-care in your life. I have to think this was part of that journey as you uncovered this. So talk to me about your self-care journey and how you got to the point you are today.
Well, I basically do what I tell my clients to do. So I also have an online holistic coaching in addition to the home bakery. And it all kind of melds together. They all bounce off of each other. But I just really have to be, when you have food sensitivities or you have an autoimmune disorder or chronic illness or something like that, like you have to be very aware of your body. But a lot of people, they're aware of their body in the sense that like they're aware that their body's in pain all of the time or that it's annoying them all of the time or whatever. And so I help people learn to like listen to your body and be like, hey, what messages is your body telling you? Like, what is your body trying to say? And then just being very aware of that. And then self-care for me, I mean, it looks super practical, like just taking the time to like move around and, stretch and, stuff like that. Like just physically moving my body, on a regular basis helps me kind of tune into it. And then I'm able to, see what else it needs. Like, oh, I'm hungry, or, oh, I need to go for a walk, or I just need to get outside for a little bit, or whatever it is, So just, It's very small and it seems very simple, but it's just being aware enough of that to like realize, oh, my body's trying to tell me something here, and like taking the time to listen.
Yeah. And give it what it needs. I love what you said about, I think sometimes even if we aren't dealing with an issue like a food sensitivity or an autoimmune issue, that we look at the pain and things our bodies are having trouble with, and we get kind of frustrated and irritated with, and see our bodies as kind of being against us rather than realizing, no, your body's an informer. Your body is giving you clues on what needs to be dealt with, what needs to be taken care of. Would you say that's accurate? And how did you get there? It sounds like you're there, but has that been a struggle? Because I know that's something a lot of people struggle with.
Yes, absolutely. No, that's definitely spot on. No, it's definitely been a process. So a little bit about like my backstory is when I was 15, I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, which is like ulcers in your colon. And so there were several things that we did, like we started with medication. It didn't work at all. And so after about 10 months, I started talking to a nutritionist. That was before, that was before online coaching, like what I do now. I talked to her on the phone. She lived in a different state. I've never met her in person. We talked 1 to 3 times. It was started off like 3 times a week, and then it kind of gradually spaced out a little bit. But I talked to her for over a year, 1 to 3 times a week. And so I learned with the nutritionist, I did learn she started cluing me in on to the part that food can heal your body. Like, because now we've got some good doctors now, I talk to people who have doctors that say like, hey, I'm coming to get your stuff because I am gluten-free and my doctor told me to go gluten-free. But my doctors, so that was a long time, that was 20 years ago. My doctors didn't tell me that. My doctors looked at me, they looked at me straight, and I don't want to speak negatively of my doctors because I'm very blessed and glad that they were there because they saved my life at different points in my life. Like there's definitely times where I almost didn't make it. So I'm very grateful for the doctors and the nurses and the medical profession. But I had doctors look at me and say, no, there is no scientific evidence that the food that you eat affects your digestive system. Like that's what they told me. And so after the meds didn't work, I did start talking to the nutritionist. So I did start learning about how food can heal your body. That wasn't, she wasn't gluten-free or anything. So that was way before any of that. But then I went to college and basically just ate whatever I wanted. So in the back of my brain, I knew like if I'd have a flare up, I would know like, ooh, I better watch, what I eat or whatever, and like give it a week. It'll go away. And that basically worked until I was a junior in college. And so during finals of my junior year of college, I started getting very, very, very sick. I did make it through, like I finished finals, but I started getting sick and I was going to stay for the whole summer because I had a student worker job, and he was going to, help with the incoming freshmen my senior year and stuff like that. So I had plans. And I was very, very sick. And I was talking to my dad on the phone one day, and he was like, "Hey, why don't you come home, to our house just for like a week? Tell your roommate you'll be back in a week, but just kind of rest up, chill, get your feet back from under you, whatever." So I went home.
Yeah.
And long story short, I did not go back to the dorm. I had that summer, a couple of months later, that summer, I had emergency surgery to remove my colon. And I was very sick going in. So yes, that's a major surgery, but I had a lot of complications because my body was not in a good place going into the surgery. So I almost died. I was given a 50% chance to live. And so I had several surgeries within that amount of time just to save my life. And that was a very long process. I was in the hospital for a very long time. I tell people it took me 2 years to finally feel like I was back to normal. As far as just, getting my full energy back and just everything feeling healed up. But even then, that was in my early to mid 20s. But it was still a journey of learning like how to heal my body and that's when I went gluten-free when I was 23. So that was after surgery and everything. And so I did learn then, like I knew within a few days, like I always tell people, I am not a person who thinks everyone should be gluten-free. Gluten is bad for you, all that. I'm not that person. But if gluten is your issue, if it does bother you, if you decide to go off of it, you will know within 3 to 7 days. I knew within 2.5 days, like I felt completely different. I'd never felt that way ever. Because, I've been sick since I've 15, probably since before.
Sure.
And so I knew that helped me have a happy gut. And so I helped, but there's still, even with the gut surgery, because some people would say, well, your colon was removed. You don't have those issues anymore. Like, oh, you had a slight intolerance to dairy. You shouldn't anymore. You don't have a colon. Well, your gut is your gut. Your gut is your whole digestive system, not just your colon. And so there is still digestive issues I have to deal with, but everyone's different. So even if like the person next to me is gluten-free, there's things that bother them that might not bother me or vice versa. So every single person has to figure out what works for them in anything health related, because it's going to be different for every person. I know I can give generic ideas and things that like, oh my goodness, this helped me so much, but you have to figure out what works for you and what works for your body and what feels good to your body, to figure out, because each person's different. And so I've learned that over the years, just learning to listen to my body as far as food goes. And in the last probably 3 to 4 years, I started increasing it into more of what I do with my coaching business. So my online holistic coaching is more of like learning to, just learning the magic of our nervous system, basically. I mean, like it's our physical bodies and moving our physical bodies, but like there's things we can do consciously with our physical bodies that help the unconscious part of because the nervous system helps with, helps us get active when we need to be active and helps us to calm down when we need to calm down, those sorts of things. But it also helps with things that we don't think about, like heart beating and breathing and digestion and stuff like that. And so that happens automatically through the nervous system. But there are physical things that we can do with our conscious brains that help the nervous system. Because like you were saying, our bodies are giving us signals all the time because they're getting input from our environment and, and that's our nervous system, basically. Our physical bodies and our 80% of your communication between your brain and your body is actually coming from your body to your brain, not from your brain to the body. The brain only gives 20% of the communication. The body gives 80%. And so a lot of times, especially in counseling and stuff, I have a counseling background. We start with the brain and we think the brain is the boss. The brain is not the boss. The brain is important. Do not check your brain at the door. Your thoughts are important. Your self-talk is important. We talk about that in coaching too, but your brain is not the boss. Your body is the boss because your body gets signals way, like if you're, walking down the road and something scares you and you jump, your brain didn't tell you to jump, your body just did it. And so your body is a lot quicker at like gathering that information. And so that's the important part of like when you listen to your body. So if you have a chronic illness, listening to, or I think this is important for all of us, even if you don't have a chronic illness, because just in Western society in general, we don't listen to our bodies. We think our brain is in charge of everything. And yes, your brain is important. So I'm not saying ignore your brain, ignore your thoughts, not saying that, but you have to start with your body first to get things in alignment. And then we can talk about your brain and your self-talk and your negative thoughts and things like that. So even in coaching, it's not that I still use the psychology side of my background. It's like, we will talk about like, okay, well, how do you talk about your body to yourself, or whatever, or like, we'll talk about that. But first I'm going to ask, well, what does that feel like in your body? Are you feeling a heaviness in your chest? Are you feeling like when I get nervous, like my stomach and my gut issues? There's some stuff happened about 2 years ago in my life that I realized my gut was still very much in charge, because I knew that I had, I've done, dealt with this for 20 years. I knew that my gut had things to say, but when I was under very high stress, my body completely revolted and I was sick every 2 weeks for 10 weeks straight. Like it was the sickest, aside from that major surgery, it was the sickest I've ever been. And it was all anxiety related. It was all my body telling me like, hey, I need help here. And so that really sent me on a journey of diving deep. Like there's things in the psychology field and trauma informed care and things like that. I knew these things worked. I knew about, the importance of like good snacks and hydration and things like that and moving your body. I knew the importance of that and I knew that it worked. But the last 2 years have been an even deeper dive of the science behind it and like why it works. Oh, this is how our body was made. This is what, but then we don't have to be powerless. We can help our body to heal itself. Like it automatically, when it feels safe, it will start, the brain and the body talk to each other and will automatically start healing themselves. But we can do something with our physical bodies and our conscious minds to help it along. We don't have to just be at the mercy of autoimmune disorder. Our body, they tell you, you have an autoimmune disorder, your body fights against itself. Well, what if you could reverse that? Like, what if you could help your body heal itself instead?
Yeah. Wow. So good. And you really already spoke to, taking care of our emotional health and physical health is one of our talking points. And I'll let you kind of touch on that more in a minute, but you really just wrap that up in a nutshell, that connection, our nervous system. I love what you said. Our nervous system responds to triggers of things that have happened in the past or familiarities. And if we don't reset that, retrain that, it will continue to respond that way. So you got to get to the root of what that is so you can't make any healing progress until that feels safe and allow yourself to move out of it. And I love you touched on that because I think that's a part of a lot of people's journeys, whether they deal with autoimmune or food challenges or sensitivities or not. It's such an important part of the healing journey. So I love your insight on that. It's so important. And you think about it, I know for me, I deal with acid reflux. So anxiety is one of my very first triggers. If the anxiousness is up within me, if I'm feeling anxious, that is the first thing to ramp up. And so I know if there's a lot going on and there's some anxiousness going on that I'm trying to work through, I have to pay extra special attention to what I feed myself, that I don't feed into what's already happening in my body. So I love that you spoke to that because there is such a powerful, powerful connection there. Talk to me about confidently setting boundaries, because I think especially with food, when you go to restaurants, when you go to family outings for dinner, it can be really difficult to be like, I'm sorry, that's just not something I can do, or having to we're very uncomfortable speaking up for ourselves. We're very uncomfortable stating what we need. And we're way too worried, in my opinion, about how other people are going to process that. And it's like, So talk to me about your boundaries journey. It's very important for you to be able to say that. And did that lead to first of all, starting Desert Balloon Bakery and making those things available to people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's gotten easier, I think. And at least now I guess it probably depends on where you live, but I feel like people are a little bit more open. Like even if they don't eat that way or don't have that certain lifestyle, that they're still like, if you're at a restaurant with friends or whatever, like I already kind of know in the back of my brain what I can and can't have. And so I'll just order whatever I want, whatever. But if somebody offers, like a cookie or bread or whatever, I'll just say, no, thank you. No, thanks, whatever. And sometimes they'll make a comment like, oh, you're trying to be healthy, huh? Or whatever. And I'll just be like, something like that, like I don't make a big deal about it.
Sure.
And so I think a lot of times, and so sometimes it doesn't even come up, directly, but if it does, or if if I'm like, hey, do y'all have a gluten-free menu or something, ask specifically, the food related things, or, I think people are, at least most of the people I'm around, they get it. Like, even if they don't understand it, or if they don't necessarily agree with it, or they don't really care, like they just eat whatever they want. They give grace for that, and so just learning, and because you do learn, I mean, especially if you're new to like gluten-free eating and things like that, it is harder to say no, but you learn if your body starts feeling better, like it's just not worth it. The side effects of eating the things that hurt me, and so that's a motivator for me, is like, hey, how do you want to feel in 3 hours? Like, do you really want this? And some people, I suppose, will, because they're like, oh, I'll just cheat or whatever. I just can't, it's not worth it to me. And so you really have to decide that within yourself. And maybe that comes back to just values and, caring for yourself too, is just, on the physical side, like I just know what helps me feel better. And so I'm going to just do that because maybe I'm just pain adverse. I don't know. But
and you also know your value, you know what you're worth, and you've been on a hard road. Nobody wants to go back there. I mean, you had a very, very traumatic health experience when you were in college. And I feel like you kind of tested and saw what you could and couldn't do and paid a price for it. And, and I think that can be a very eye-opening experience as well. But I think you said something important, but valuing yourself enough to just know what your non-negotiables are. I'm like, nope, I am not going to put myself through that.
Yeah.
I think more of myself and what I'm going to feel like in 3 hours.
Yeah. And you don't have to make a big deal about it. Like I would just say to anybody, like, be themselves. Some people would just be like, make a big show, or whatever, like, oh, nope, don't want to do that, whatever. If that's them, cool, do it that way. If that's not you and you'd be embarrassed to, like, it's, you don't have to make a big deal. You just be like, no, thanks. Oh, looks good, but no thanks. Like, you don't have to make a big deal about it. Setting boundaries doesn't always mean like you have to come roaring in and here I am, hear me. Just it could be it could be quiet, it could be small, but you just where your boundaries are.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think it's really important. We don't have to over-explain. I think that we feel obligated in our own heads. About over explaining. And I think that's a really good point. I like what you said there. So important. We're to that taking care of our emotional health as much as our physical health. You nailed it earlier. Is there anything you want to add to that? And kind of when did you get to that? I mean, you had the surgery, you kind of realized was it right after that? Or you mentioned the last 2 years were very pivotal for you too in this. So talk to me about that, kind of those transitions and getting to this space.
Just the physical and the emotional and the mental are so connected. And coming from a psychology background, I suppose I kind of knew that already. Like some people just aren't aware of that. They think of them as very separate. Some people are like aware. I think I was aware in my brain, like consciously, but, I don't know. And I knew, enough about, eating gluten-free. So I knew that as far as like, oh, I feel better. So of course I'm going to have more energy. So I'm going to have more clarity in my brain and I can focus better. So that I kind of knew. So 2 years ago, I guess that's probably when it's when it started clicking. There was things that I knew already, like I'd been trained in, like with the psychology background, I'd been trained in trauma-informed care, which is just really helping, like, especially dealing with foster and adoptive kids and their families. And so kids that come from hard places, that have come from abuse and neglect and places where they didn't have enough food and things like that. And so when they have behaviors, it helped me because I was working in the schools at the time, as kind of basically sort of a group counselor. And it helped me relate to them because even if they weren't in a foster adoptive situation, a lot of them came from just hard situations, just hard places. And it helped me relate to them because when they would have behavioral issues, instead of looking at them and being like, what's the matter with you? I would be like, okay, what's going on here? That could mean something's going on at home. They're mad, or they're treating their, classmate wrong, but like maybe it's a symptom of something else. You approach it differently, instead of being like, oh my goodness, stop doing that. You just be like, whoa, right. You want to try that again? That didn't sound very respectful. Like you just approach it differently. And so I'd started learning that, about probably 10, 12 years ago. I mean, so years of this. So I knew it worked because it helped me with my students. I knew it worked. Yeah. But then 2 years ago, I decided to become a foster mom. And it was a very short stint. It was only a few months. It was like 3 or 4 months. I had 2 different placements. So my first placement, was a teenage girl, but she didn't stay for very long because she had another family member that took her in. So that one was very short, a couple weeks. So it was a good, I was like,
dip your toe in the water.
Dip my toe in there. And so I was like, okay, this is, it was it was still hard, but it was a good first placement. Well, then a couple of months later, I had another placement, and it was 2 little boys. And, just me being a single person, I think what it basically boiled down to was like, I didn't have anybody to be like, Tag, you're it, and you take it for a couple of hours. And so, because yes, foster care is very hard. If anybody has, anybody listening has done foster adoptive care, it's hard, period, but then when you're single, and some people, I had friends that had done it as singles. So I was like, I can do it. I am a counselor. Like, I have the counseling background. I'll be a great foster parent. Like, it'll be great. And it was just, the reality was they came from a lot of trauma, and there was 2 of them and only 1 of me. And they had never, ever, ever had any kind of adult figure in their life ever. They'd never been parented. Wow. And so it was just all of that. And so I only had them for 10 weeks. After that, they went to another family that had 2 parents. And I even got to talk to them on the phone. And I told them, I was like, hey, even though y'all are first time fosters too, like, there's 2 of y'all that will help.
Right.
There's just that reality, and some people, maybe some people just have more capacity. That's another thing about listening to your body, acknowledging the capacity that you have. And my capacity is smaller than some people's. And so, but during those 10 weeks, I did the best that I could. I don't think it was a very good job, but it was the best that I could. But during that time, I got physically sick. I'd be throwing up every 2 weeks, every 12 to 14 days. It was like clockwork. I could time it. And then I'd have to take the kids to school. Like, I'd be up all night, and then I'd have to take the kids to school and stuff. And, but I knew, I kind of knew after it had happened a couple of times, I knew it was anxiety. It wasn't a stomach bug, like at first I was like, oh my goodness, I'm just catching all the stomach bugs. And then I realized like, oh no, this is anxiety, like, cause I could just feel it in my system. And so that really, after that, and after it was still several months before I could just start processing it. But 4 to 6 months later, after I started just processing through it, and I realized, like, even more just on a very, very experiential level, like, your physical body and your physical body talk, people say your gut is a brain, and that is so true. And so that just took me down the road of, I started realizing, like, oh, that stuff in trauma-informed care, like, that works on adults too. It's not just for kids.
So true.
It helped me. And so, like, I knew some of it consciously because of just education and training and stuff. But it took me, the last 2 years have been a deep dive into like, what does this actually mean? Like, not just in my brain, not just on paper, like, what does this look like? And a lot of it goes to just physical move, like keeping my body moving. And even if it's just stretching or Pilates or very gentle yoga, some days if I'm on it, having a tired day, like still, even when you're sluggish and tired, keep your body moving, because it helps you just move that, because your stress and your trauma get stuck in your body if you don't move it. And emotions, that's why it's important to like feel your emotions, is because if it doesn't move through your body, it's like comes in waves. So let it move. Cry if you have to, get mad if you have to. Tomorrow will be better. Like it will go. It's not going to stay forever. But if you don't let it move through you, and same with stress and trauma, just, moving your physical body. If you don't let it move through you, it gets stuck there. And then that's what causes even more like pain and inflammation and sickness and all of that. And I'm not saying all sickness is caused by trauma. Like, that's not true. But a lot of trauma can cause sickness if you don't, deal with it. So it's not saying don't ever have stress, don't get stressed ever, don't ever get anxious. That's unrealistic. It's saying like, hey, when you get stressed or when you get anxious or when traumatic things happen to you, like move through your body. So like, just pause and be like, what is my body trying to tell me? And then if you need to move around, I've got some exercises that I do with my coaching clients about just moving your body, depending on where they hold stress. I usually ask them, where in your body do you tend to hold stress? And so we'll work through that. And then we'll come back and I'll be like, okay, how are you feeling now? And then like, okay, what else does your body need? What is your body telling you? And sometimes it's like wrapping up in it. Like I have a weighted blanket right here. And a lot of times if I'll either have it on my lap or I'll wrap it around my shoulders and like a big giant hug, because I'm like, I just need a hug. I just need a hug. So but that's because I've learned to listen. What does my body need? So sometimes my body's like, well, I'm kind of hungry. Can't we just eat breakfast, please? And then sometimes my body is like, I need a hug. And so I'll wrap it in the, or I'll make my hot tea and drink my hot tea, so stuff like that it sounds basic, but like we ignore our bodies so much, and just can we just listen to our body? Like our bodies could be friends. Our bodies could be our friends. We think that our bodies are annoying. And like, even when I was very sick, or during those 2 years of just 2 years ago, during those couple of months of that just stress every day. For me and for them, it wasn't just, nothing was their fault. It was just the situation is just hard. But during that, I would literally, when my body was so sick, I would be like, oh my goodness, I can't believe my body's doing this again. Why is it being so weird? I was still talking to myself like that. And during that time, I read a book by Dr. Hilary McBride called The Wisdom of Your Body. Life-changing.
It's so good.
Life-changing.
Absolutely.
And I read it right after all of that. And I was like, because she challenges you on that about how you talk to your body. And I was like, I haven't been very nice to my body, have I? And so that really, that started, I will credit her that book as the catalyst for helping me learn, like go down that path of, so it did start. I mean, so that was the brain too, self-talk, the brain, I did have to change how I talk to my body, but it also was like learning to pause and listen to my body. And so instead, when I get sick or when I feel bad now, instead of being like, oh my goodness, my body's doing it again, it's revolting against me, I'll be like, whoa. Okay. My body's trying to tell me something. And so then I'll just give myself permission. I literally will tell myself sometimes out loud, hey, number one, be gentle with your body today. Number two, you have permission to go slow. Like, okay, so you've got stuff to do today.
I love that.
You have to get up, you have to get dressed, you have to go to work, but you have permission to go slow. And I will just tell myself, like, just be gentle with yourself today. So gentle with what I eat, gentle with how I move, but I'm still going to move, but I give myself permission to go slow some days.
I love that. That's basically all we talk about in a nutshell. That's so many beautiful tips there and how to go about it in that journey. Thank you so much for all that. So good. And I've read Hilary's book as well, and I follow her, and it is life-changing. It really does make a difference. And I had to change how I was like seeing it, my body and my emotions as clues, and being curious rather than being frustrated and talking poorly. And it is a shift. It is a shift. And it makes such a huge difference. Thank you so much. So good. How we can support ourselves and other women in living unapologetically. You are on that path. You are doing that in your work, not just for women, but for anybody who needs the help. But talk to me about that kind of unapologetic path for you and how you've gotten to this space you are in today.
I think it just goes to just realizing that we're all human, and so we're not perfect, but also that we're just there's so much to every story. Everybody has a story. And so like when we approach each other, like knowing that person has a story that we don't know about and just being gentle with them too. It helps if you think of people, even people you don't agree with or people you might think are weird or people that annoy you or whatever. If you approach them as like, hey, they're just humans too, like it just kind of helps you stop making assumptions or judgments or whatever for good or for bad, So like, instead of being like, oh my goodness, that person has 50,000 followers on Facebook, I could never be like that. Or, something like it could be somebody you admire or somebody that maybe annoys you or somebody like that. Like it doesn't matter if we think of them as like, oh, they're humans too. It just helps you. It just kind of levels the playing field and it helps you step forward and be your best person, but then also helps you give grace when maybe the people around you aren't the best people. Or like, I don't want to speak negatively. I'm just saying like whether we have good days or bad days, whether it's ourselves or other people, like when we all think of each other as like human and complex and all of us have a story, it just helps us just be there for each other. And like, it helps us in ourselves, like live unapologetically as far as like being willing to like, if I know like, hey, my physical health is really important. So I'm going to say no to this opportunity because, it goes against what my body needs right now or whatever. Or it could be like, hey, friendships are really important and this is a really close friend. So I'm going to actually say yes to them because they need my help today. And, so I'm going to actually stand up for them and be there for them, even if it's hard for me because that's a value of mine, but also they need me. They need me to be a friend right now, And so I don't know if that makes sense or if that answers the question or not.
No, that absolutely does. And when you show up that way, when you show up with that empathy, with seeing people as humans, it encourages other people to act that way too. It kind of takes the defenses down. And when you can approach it from a lens of they have a story. There's a story and a reason behind these actions, behind these choices. And instead of I think we attach people's behaviors too much to their humanity and we decide whether they're good or bad based on behaviors that we don't have any idea what's informing those behaviors. I mean, we can decide we don't like the behaviors, but we make it personal. And when you can come in with that empathetic stance, and it's a journey and it's something you got to be mindful of every day, but I think it allows and gives permission and makes other people feel safe to do the same. You've talked about values a lot, and let's get to that and the importance of setting and coming back to your why and your values in everything you do.
I mean, it's going to be different for every person, I suppose. For me, a lot of it is, some of it is just because of my own journey, like physical health is one of my top values, and sometimes that feels kind of selfish, but like if my physical body goes down, like it's I'm no good to anybody. No. And so that is a value of mine, so to think things through and make decisions that way. And then, it just depends because some people might be extroverts and get their energy from being around people. And then some of us who are introverts have to realize like, oh, actually sometimes being with certain people is life-giving. And then sometimes we have to have lots of alone time. And it's not because we don't care about people. It's because we just need to recharge, for a little bit and hear ourselves think and, things like that. And so, there's just several different things that like, that's when you know what your values are, because each person's going to be different. So you can, each person can decide like what their values are. But when you know what they are, then it makes decision making a whole lot easier. You know, like you don't have to think through as much because you're just like, oh, no, this is a value of, you know, I have a value for generosity, so I'm going to give here. Or, you know, I have a value for this, so this is an automatic yes for me. You know, that sort of thing. It just makes decision making a lot easier, whether it's your physical body or time with your, you know, your family or how you spend your time or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's a great compass. And I don't know, I mean, and it's because otherwise you've got nothing to help you narrow those things down. And you know, like going back to the body, you can feel it in your body when you're out of alignment on those things. I mean, and so I think it's also something you have to revisit from time to time because your values will change over time in different seasons. But going back to what you said about paying attention to your body and building that, and don't be afraid to, I think it's very important. You said this, you are worth making decisions around your health. You're worthy of that, you know, and I think we sometimes get this selfishness mindset around that. Like, no, this is for my well-being. I deserve to feel well. And I'm only going to be, if I want to show up well for others in these relationships, I've got to be my best self first.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you have a value for like being there for your close friend, you know, community, wherever your community is, you know, if you're like, no, I want to be there for my friends. I want to be there for my spouse. I want to be there for my kids. I want to be there for my parents or my family or, you know, whatever, like whoever the important people are in your life. Like if that's a value, your physical health and your emotional health and your mental health also have to be a value too, because if all that's out of whack, then you're not going to show up as your best self for the people that you love the most. And so you have to know in your knower, like that you deserve to be, you deserve to say yes to your physical health or your mental health or your emotional health or whatever that is, you know, whether it's seeing a therapist or seeing a health coach or whatever, or choosing to eat a certain way. Like you deserve to take the time to take care of yourself, because then, if your physical body's in alignment, then you can show up for those that you love the most. And, you know, that's the most important thing. And so, but it all goes together, you know, it can't be one without the other, I don't think.
Living out of your own expectations versus others' expectations of you. Talk to me about your expectations journey.
Ooh, that one's a hard one. I guess it kind of goes, it might go along with boundaries as far as like when you figure out what you need and where your boundaries are, then it kind of helps you be able to set those boundaries with other people. And then, I mean, because sometimes living out of your own expectations, or it kind of is setting boundaries. You know, if you have people in your life that like expect a certain thing of you or whatever, you have to like set that boundary or be like, no, this is what I've decided or whatever. I don't really have any specific. Did you have a follow-up question? Because I don't have any specific thing that's coming to mind.
Well, do you feel like that was a transition point, or is that something you've always been pretty comfortable with?
Oh, no, that's definitely not something that I'm definitely a rule follower, and I'm definitely a person who would rather go with the flow. That I'm not a natural challenger. I have people in my life that are natural challengers, so that's interesting, but I'm not one of them. Usually I'll see like I'll see people in my life that are like that naturally they just do whatever they want. Like they run to the beat of their own drum, you know, and I'll look at them, and sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish I could do that. Like, and so I have learned, I mean, I've, you know, as I've grown and matured, I've gotten better at that, but no, it does not come naturally. But I really think my learning of it has come out of just knowing my values and knowing what's important to me. And then that helps me move in that direction. That's the only thing I can think of because it doesn't come naturally. So if I am going against other people's expectations, it's literally because I've made the value choice to be like, no, this part's important to me. I'm heading this way, you know, because I wouldn't naturally do that just on a whim.
Right. No, I love how you tied that to your values. I think that's really important because, you know, I think sometimes in those situations, especially when you're around people that are very comfortable walking to the beat of their own drum, communicating when you've kind of shifted the narrative, when you're like, no, these are my values now. So I need to, you know, communicate this to people. That can be kind of, you know, uncomfortable at times and intimidating. But when you can point it back to your values, then it becomes a lot simpler.
Yes.
accepting the layered aspects of ourselves. And this is accepting all the parts of ourselves, all the parts of our journey. You have had to accept that these are the cards I've been dealt. Mm-hmm. This is how my body moves in the world. And so talk to me about your layers journey, because you talked about, this going through those times of like figuring out when you're 15, kind of challenging your body and the narrative on what you can and can't eat, kind of pushing pushing that to the point where you ended up very, very ill and in a life-threatening surgery, and then having to kind of rebound and heal from that and just kind of get okay with that. Because I don't think we can get to a place of value till we can get okay with all those parts that make us up. So talk to me about your layers journey.
Yeah, that one, I think, especially and this may be for anybody, but especially if you have a chronic illness or an autoimmune issue, there are definitely days where you run into the fact that like, oh, my body can't do that today or whatever. Like and I've just learned to accept, even just emotionally and just with stimulation, my capacity is a lot smaller than other people's. So I've just come to accept that. And some of it's personality, too. It doesn't even necessarily have to do with autoimmune stuff. It's just personality in general. Like I come to the table with less energy than most people. So my cup gets full real quick. But on the physical side of it, or the emotional, like the health side, a lot of times we have to, those of us who have, autoimmune and chronic illness and stuff, and some more than others, depending on, what you're struggling with. There are days that you're like, physically, my body cannot do this. And so it's the balance between acknowledging like, hey, my capacity is less than other people's, and that is okay. Mm-hmm. It's just how it is. But then also like in learning to listen to your body, you learn that actually my body does have capacity that's pretty amazing, and it can do more than I sometimes think it can. So like, even if it doesn't feel like it can do much, like, well, if I do some, maybe some stretching, some Pilates or, gentle stretching or something today, because you can just YouTube that, like 10-minute morning stretch, full body morning stretch, whatever, like just let somebody else teach you, or whatever. But so I'll just Google like 10-minute yoga, easy, gentle morning, like nothing hard here, people. And then I'll but then when I do like stretching and stuff, and then you go back to listening to your body, like, okay, yeah, my body feels better now. Then I can start to appreciate and be grateful. Like, oh, my body actually is pretty capable of, like, okay, maybe it's not capable of what I wish it would do, but like, hey, it's made it this far, like that's what I like to encourage people with. And you've probably seen that quote on like Instagram or whatever, the little meme that says like, you have survived 100% of your hardest days. And I'm like, yes, I have. And so, just if you're struggling, you can think back to like, even if you're like, I would not wish that on my worst enemy, but I'm here and I'm still alive. And so what can I do today? And like, even if the capacity feels so tiny, like just being grateful, like, hey, I can get up today. Or if you have a autoimmune disorder that like physically, like you can't get out of bed some days, like maybe you can sit there and read, or if you have kiddos, maybe you can like sit there and read with and snuggle with your kids. And like, so you got to have a cuddle day with your kiddos that day, or something like that, like not brushing the hard things under the rug, not saying like, oh, it's somebody else has it worse. It could be worse. You have it so good. Not saying that at all. Sometimes life is just hard. And I'm like, I'm sorry.
Yes.
When people will tell me things, sometimes all you can do is like, I am so sorry. That is really tough. That's hard. Yeah. So not saying it could be worse, but just saying like in the middle of, God, this is a hard day. Also realizing like, okay, but I got up today. I woke up today. And I got to listen to beautiful music today, turn on a Spotify playlist or something, like just finding something to be grateful for does not mean that the hard things don't exist, but the good and the hard can exist at the same time if we learn to hold it and look for it.
That right there, so important. I love that. I love how you explain that. I love how you laid that out. That is beautiful because, we are nuanced. And so we can make room for it all. And I mean, for you, your body has been very resilient and it is healed from really traumatic things. And so if you can, just having that to remind yourself of while acknowledging, but you describe such a beautiful balance of acknowledging what it is, but also you have choice within that. You have choice within that of I can choose to engage in these things that I wouldn't have gotten to experience otherwise, or I can sit here and just feel terrible about myself. You have choice within that. And you've found that beautiful balance. Really, I love that. I love that so much. I think that's going to be really a helpful reminder to a lot of people and really encouraging. Thank you so much for that. In summary, in living out feel, finding empowerment, embracing layers, talk to me about how that affects your relationship with yourself as well as your relationship with other people.
I think it just goes back to like realizing that we're all like our mind and our body, our physical body and our emotions and our mind, and then our relationships with others too, because that's part of it. Like we actually do get energy from each other. Like that's not a woo-woo thing. That's a real thing.
Yeah.
All that is, if we can learn to just be aware of it, like, okay, maybe we don't all understand it. And maybe some of it is kind of mystical, some of it, like, I don't get all of it, but some of it I understand the science behind. So I'm getting more of it, that sort of thing.
Sure.
But like knowing that there are those different layers of our body and our soul and our mind and our emotions and then our relationships. Like if we are aware that all of those are there and they all interconnect and they're all important, it's not like one is above the other. But one also can't be ignored. Like literally they all affect each other. If we try to ignore one, we will just ignore all of them and then go through life like a zombie and don't want to do that.
Yeah. It's a trickle down effect.
Yeah. And so it's just being aware that it's all connected, and some things will, depending on your season of life, like there may be moments where like one needs more attention. Like maybe there's times where my physical body really needs some attention right now, or like, my mental health really needs some attention. I need to go see a therapist, or whatever. So there are going to be times where you lean toward one maybe, but just knowing and not forgetting that the other ones are there, the other parts, and that they all affect each other and they're all important and they're all worth like caring for. I think that's just the best way to, walk through life.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. I love how you talked about the energy from other people and the kinds of relationships you're in. It makes you think about what kind of energy do I want around me? What kind of relationships I want around me? So really important connection there. Talk to me a little bit. This is off talking points, but talk to me about how you started Desert Bloom Bakery and now you are moving into the coaching piece. Talk to me about kind of that journey, that evolution.
Cool. Yeah. So I've had the home bakery for 6 years. So I do gluten-free and dairy-free baked goods, but then I also do, I do online baking classes so people can just learn how to bake at home from anywhere at their own pace. And then I do ship some of my things in the US. So like my baking mixes and the chai and hot chocolate mixes, and the granola and things like that. So that's all on my website. But so I started that, and then I am able to do, markets and pop-ups and have my home bakery open during the week. But it is very seasonal. And so it just depends. Like I was able at the beginning of 2023, I was able to start doing that full time. Because before that I've always had like multiple jobs, but I would I'd be baking in the morning and then in the afternoon I'd be at the school doing the group counseling and things like that. So some of the doors with some of my other jobs kind of closed. And I still teach online. I teach online psychology classes for a local college. So I still do that, but that's online. So as far as the face-to-face things, the bakery was full-time in 2023. But then just because it is seasonal, there are times where I just realized that it would help me to have an online source of income, but also that was such a passion, like just from all the things we talked about in this podcast. I knew that there was a connection between the physical body and because I get to talk to people with the bakery. I talk to people all the time. Like it's not just, we do talk about food and gut issues, but we end up talking about like how it's our emotions and our physical bodies affect each other. Like we talk about that all the time. And so I knew that it was a thing. And I knew that the people that I work with the bakery that were my customers at the bakery, it would resonate with them too. Cause a lot of them have autoimmune issues. And so I was just had this passion in me, like, well, if I could do anything like, cause I've done counseling before, like I said, and I'd done private practice and some of it was during COVID. So I'd done online, counseling before, but I didn't really want to do the like cognitive behavioral therapy as much, like the what some people call like talk therapy. It just wasn't my jam. It's good for some people are like amazing at it, and it just wasn't my fit. But I was like, if I could sort of do that, but talk to people about their bodies but listening to it, like what I've learned in the last 2 years about listening to their bodies, but then how that does affect, like we could talk about food and we could talk about mindset, but like, let's start with our bodies first. I started kind of dreaming about that this summer and started putting that into place. And so I've got the online holistic coaching set up now where I can do one-on-one. So I specifically gear it toward women who have autoimmune issues and like anxious nerves. Because those kind of tie together for a lot of people.
They do.
And it just helps them one-on-one, like learn to find that inner calm, like learn to calm their bodies. And then that way they can start learning to heal themselves, like, because they're not powerless anymore. They don't have to be under the thumb of their chronic illness. Like they can help their bodies learn to heal themselves. And so I just started that and that's just been it's just every time I meet with somebody, I'm just like, oh yes, this is what I'm meant to do. Like I love it so much.
That's awesome. Oh, I love that connection. So and this is going to be on the resources page on our website, listeners. So don't worry if you're driving down the road, you pull over and stop it. Tell us what your website's called and all the places we can find you.
So the home bakery is Desert Bloom Bakery in all the places, Facebook, Instagram, website, Desert Bloom Bakery with one S. And then the online holistic coaching is Restored Holistic Coaching, all the places. So restoredholisticcoaching.com and then Restored Holistic Coaching on Facebook and Instagram.
Name 5 activities that nourish you.
Reading, drinking hot tea, wrapping up in my weighted blanket, hanging out with close friends, and listening to calming music or music, whatever the fun music that sounds fun in the moment.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah. Listen to your body. It'll tell you what you need to listen to. Absolutely. And 5 words on how you want to feel the next 6 months.
So I wrote these down. Hopeful, accomplished, peace, enjoyment, like just enjoying friends and experiences, relaxed.
Good stuff. Oh, Heather, thanks so much. This was so much good and so much more than I even anticipated it would be. You shared so many practical steps and knowledge, but also things that people don't think about, but you gave people such a great, I think, kind of map of how to think about these things. And I think that so many women are going to find so helpful. And so I really appreciate your time today. You're sharing the work that you do, how you've taken this experience and continue to learn and grow and then share that with others. I think it's difference making. It's powerful. It's important. And I'm so thankful that there's people like you in the world doing this. Again, listeners, go to embracinglayers.com. All that her information that you've heard her share today is going to be there. And take some time to listen to your body this week. And instead of, getting frustrated with it, listen to it. What's it trying to tell you? What does it need? How can you feed it? Whether it's your spirit, your mental, emotional, physical, but sit with that and really pay attention and see it as get curious. I think instead of getting critical, get curious. And because I think there's a lot of power in that. And Heather, thanks so much again for being with me. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. Oh, and I do have a freebie for everyone. And we'll put this in the show notes. We'll put it in the show notes, but it is my 5 quick ways to regulate your nervous system. So it's like 5 super simple, basic ways you could do it today. But like, whether you tend to go run high on anxiety or you tend to go into shutdown mode, regulating your nervous system just gets you back into like that optimal zone of where you're functioning the way it needs, your body's functioning the way it needs to, your brain's functioning the way it needs to. So it's 5 quick ways to do that today. And so I'll put that in the show notes too.
Awesome. And make sure that gets on our resources page, and we'll share that on our social media too. So watch out for that. Thank you for that. That's awesome. And so important. It's amazing what a difference just getting a reset on your nervous system to do. So much power in that. Thank you so much. All right, audience, you've got that. Look forward to that. Take some time, reset, listen to your body, be kind to yourself, and have a great week.